Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our first virtual book club. My name is Lesley Mason. I am the director of the Carteret County Public Library System, and I have a special guest here with me today to talk about our book selection.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gwen Roberts. I am the director at the Carteret County Rape Crisis Center. I provide therapy for clients that come in there, and also I administer and lead the program. Some people call me Dr. Roberts. I'm still not quite used to it, but I'm trying to learn to wear that title.
Absolutely. And I'm so excited to have Gwen with us today. It's perfect for this book club selection because our selection this month is The Beauty in Breaking by Dr. Michele Harper. I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that I want to thank the network of the National Library of Medicine, of which the public library is an affiliate. They provided us a grant to purchase the materials for the library and to host this book club. So we're really excited about that. I want to note that Michele Harper has worked as an emergency room doctor for more than a decade at various institutions, including chief resident at Lincoln Hospital in the South Bronx and in the ER at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Philadelphia. She's a graduate of Harvard University and the Renaissance School of Medicine at Stony Brook University. She's an African-American woman and brings that to her story. And I think it's really interesting to see her through her patients, which was something that I really appreciated about the story. It's not so much about her, is it, Gwen? She really talks about her patients.
And absolutely. And I think what she talks about a lot is how her patients impacted her rather than about herself. And so, and they brought about certain thoughts and feelings in her, but we get a glimpse into her development as a person, but it's not a whole lot. It's mainly through her patients.
Absolutely. There was a New York Times article about this story and the title of the article for New York Times was Who Saves the Doctor? And the answer is her patients. And one of the central themes in the story was the idea of healing your physical health and how that heals your spiritual or mental health. And so how do you see that in your patients as well, or the people that come to you for service? Is it a physical and spiritual mental healing?
Yes, and yes, and yes. However, the way it generally goes is that if I have a client come in, most of my clients are there because of some type of sexual assault or rape. So when they come in, we do deal immediately with what the pain is that day. And that does not necessarily mean it's the assault or the rape. Sometimes the pain that day is, um, my boss didn't want to let me off when I had to go to the court, or nobody in my family believed me, or whatever. And I have to also keep in mind that a lot of my clients come in as an adult who's been molested or raped as a child. And so sometimes the immediate thing that brings to them is their lifestyle. They're either been on drugs, they drink too much, or they just can't keep a good relationship and they say, I don't know what's wrong with me. Somebody that went to a doctor or a coworker or something says, maybe you need to talk to a therapist about something that has happened. And so they come to us. And then we start at the surface, and then generally somewhere down there, we deal with the assault that has happened to them.
So let's talk a little bit about Victoria Honor, which is a patient in the book who is a survivor of sexual assault, and she is former military, and her story was very impactful. And how did you feel as somebody in this field dealing with survivors of sexual assault? How poignant was her story, and how true to life was it portrayed in the book?
Very much true to life. It hit home. And it was really close to me because we have had and still have some clients that were in the military that were sexually assaulted, and their story was what I was reading. And I was just like, I was holding my breath the whole time. I was like, oh my God, this is so true. And I have women who tried to bring charges, were laughed at, transferred, not believed. So what she wrote was absolute truth. And it really touched me. These women have a harder time in dealing with their sexual assault than a civilian woman would, because they have these commands that are over them. And many times it is the command or commander that's over the woman who is the one that's committed the assault on the woman. And as we read her story, not only was it one, it was several. And she could do nothing about it. She was stuck.
I think too, within that story, it was especially true when there's multiple stories in the book where there's a racial component. And so this is a great book again too. It's Black History Month. We're hearing the empowering story of a woman, of an African American woman who moved through the medical field. But she also mentions that, when a young woman of color sees her, it's being, she could see herself, and so therefore, she felt more confident discussing the issue. I really would like to talk about the idea of racial bias and the distrust of the medical field amongst the African American community, which is very valid, and how that impacts even you. I mean, here you are in a small county where you have your PhD. How often are people more willing to come to you for help solely because they can see themselves in you?
That's a loaded question because there are many aspects of it that I have to deal with. First of all, probably I know I was the only African American therapist in the Rape Crisis Center. I don't think that there was one before me. And so, being like a first in the field, all of my clients were Caucasian clients, which trauma is trauma. It didn't bother me. Even today, I have a problem having African American women come in. And it's not just a county problem. There was a news article this morning on I think it was today, the one with, I don't know, Gail, yes, the one with her. They had an article on today stating how African American women do not come forth when they've been sexually assaulted because of the way they're treated. Many times they're not believed. And if they are believed, it's only because you wanted it, because stereotypical, that's how you women are, and so they don't want to come forward. I have had some success in word of mouth, having African American women come into our program, not in the numbers that I want them, because I want to increase that. But again, it's not me, it's the stigma that society puts on the woman. And so once they get in and start to trust me, we can pull some of those things apart, and it's a little bit easier. So there's a lot into that hinders an African American woman getting treatment.
Absolutely. I think too, when we look at society and the mistreatment of minorities, everything from forced sterilization, the Tuskegee experiments in Alabama, up into 1972, it's just this systemic racial issue for minorities to even access healthcare, let alone get the appropriate treatment, and just how they are treated in the moment. And I think the stories of Dominic, which was the young man who was brought in by the police, to having basically the police wanted to force a medical procedure on him. And thankfully, Dr. Harper stepped in and said, "We do not perform procedures against our patients against their will." And she has written several other articles, stating that she stands up to the police. And just the treatment of Black bodies in general is something that she touches on, and I think we don't talk about that enough.
I think you're right. That was another point in the book that stuck with me. The thing about that is that what she stood up for was right and correct, because they were trying to force this type of procedure and having this client admit that he did something wrong, and they have no reason to stop him in the first place. And so that she stood up for. But the part of it that bothered me, that really stuck with me, is that once she made that decision, her supervisee, someone that she supervised, went above her and called. I don't think she knows what she's doing. She can't do the job. That is what I have. Oh my gosh. That's what I have experienced.
Oh,
Hold on a second. I'm on call. Just give me a moment.
yeah. Go ahead. The audacity. So the point that we're talking about in the book was, so Dr. Harper has residents who are working under her, and when she refused to force a X-ray on Dominic, the patient, her white younger, student called the legal department. That part shocked me as well. To me, it's like the privilege just oozed off the page with that interaction. And I came into my professional life in Baltimore City, and so I was mentored by Black women, and so to me, the audacity in that moment to challenge my supervisor, first of all, in general, and then to be so adamant about it and blasé. Like, even when the legal department said, "Oh, absolutely, Dr. Harper is absolutely right," she didn't take the mea culpa after that. It was just kind of like, "Oh,
yeah, yes." Oh, so this one time she was right, was the attitude that I read into it, not that this is my supervisor and has experience and is knowledgeable about what she is doing. Yes. And as we talk about that point, Dr. Harper brought out another idea. For me, she didn't fully develop it, but I knew it was underlying that people expect for her to do more and learn more and be smarter because she's African American, and those people tend to be other African Americans. You better do better than I do. You got to go to the head of the class. And the sad part is that when they do, they don't climb up any faster.
yeah."
You got to be twice as good to get the job. That doesn't make sense.
That's a perfect segue into another part of the book that I identified with. So I very much saw myself in Dr. Harper's struggle to find a place in the larger organizations she was a part of. I came from a large library system in Washington, D.C., where I very much kind of struggled between this practitioner and administrator. So I very much related to the story there. And ultimately, she got so frustrated with her lack of being able to move forward, to the tune that they left a position vacant than to provide her with the opportunity. She ultimately went back to her original passion, which was clinical care. And
yes.
I struggle with that now. I don't know many library directors that are hosting book clubs. So, but how do you maintain the balance between administration? You just took an on-call call. So, help me as a younger administrator. How do you find that balance?
I think my balance comes, one, the passion for the program. I want the program never to die because it's needed. And so I put everything else aside. Race, color, creed, gender, doesn't matter, because I have to have the program. That's the administrative side of me. And I see how much good it can do. The other side of me says, I have to fight for people. I have to fight for people. I've been fortunate and I call myself blessed because I haven't gone through the trauma that a lot of my clients have gone through. And so not too long ago, I had a client that was I always get those, those letters.
Yeah.
Um, so he was of that community, and his struggle with sexual assault goes beyond just feeling the way general people do. He couldn't understand just looking at me. Why am I in this bad position? Because people just looked at me. They don't know me, they just assume. So fighting for his right to have a voice, to be treated, not to be misunderstood, to be listened to, that's another compassion that I have. That's what I need to do for everyone, not just for that community, for every community.
Yeah.
We were fortunate. We've had some inroads into our Hispanic community because they're another set of people that are stigmatized
Yes.
and don't want to come in and don't, when they trust a doctor, they trust fully, but they generally don't, especially here in America. So there's a lot of battles to be fought.
And I see that too in my work. I'm very passionate about library service, and so I'm always coming back to that patron focused point of service. And so, yeah, I'm going to continue to keep that at the forefront. So thank you. Thank you for
Absolutely.
that. You've talked a lot about the trauma of your individual clients, and trauma is another kind of theme through the book. And Dr. Harper does touch on her own trauma. She had an abusive childhood. She grew up in a physically abusive environment, and her brother ended up in the emergency room, and I think that kind of put her on the path to in medicine. She kind of thinks about her brother's presence in the emergency room, and if, and the quote is, if my brother's body could be patched up, then certainly in its own time his spirit could mend too. So she kind of starts on this path towards medicine. It was a little surprising to me that the book is a memoir, but yet she doesn't really address her own trauma except through her own spiritual journey. We come to find out much later in the book that her abusive father, reaches out, that her abusive father was a physician himself.
Yes.
Talk like that came out of left field. I was like, how did I miss that in the beginning? She didn't touch on that.
No. And the thing of it is that there's a couple of things that I think would have been very good had it been explored a little bit more. One, the trauma of domestic violence.
Yeah.
I grew up in that. My mom left my father when I was 10 because of, the domestic violence and the beating and all of this. And so I could relate to that. And I could relate to her a little bit, but I think it would have been better, not better, fuller if she had brought that into light of, look, we were a middle class family. We were not in the projects. We were not poor. And all of these things were happening within our community. Now, she did bring the point that what's done in the house stays in the house. You don't tell anybody your business. You act like you're happy. But I would like to have seen her connect that to a wider audience.
I agree. I miss that too. And being familiar with Washington, D.C., she wasn't middle class. She was in an affluent, upper class neighborhood. And, there was such a larger piece of her backstory that
Yeah.
I wanted. But then, Gwen, I'm going to be honest with you, I was thinking about it and I thought, does she really owe us that?
Well, okay. Okay.
You know,
No
like,
and yes. No, she doesn't. Yes, it would have been good to have that explored a little bit more as encouragement for other African American women
okay, yeah.
to say you can overcome that, whether it's you're coming from a poor background or a rich background, there's a middle ground that women go through. And so women can identify from either side. That's what I would like to see develop a little bit more.
Yeah.
All women can identify.
Yeah, I wanted more about her just because she's
Yeah.
so fascinating and strong. And as a woman who is, leading a county agency, I wanted more of that. But I did find a lot in the stories of her patients. Is there another patient that you can think back on in the story that we haven't touched on that kind of was poignant for you? For me, it was I think it was Mrs. Hernandez. I'm flipping through my notes. It was the caregiver. She was the caregiver who thought she was having heart palpitations. And then when she got to the emergency room, she's like, I'm fine. And she wanted to be dismissive. How often does being that caretaker impact folks, and how quick we are to dismiss, pouring from an empty cup, the idea of self-care, which Dr. Harper does really well, talking about. Dr. Harper bought herself this really nice pot that made her happy, and her yoga practice, and but it was nice to see that duality of, here I am, I'm a doctor, I can afford these, yoga classes, reaching out to Mrs. Hernandez to try to get her reconnected to some of her self-care. So that one was a good one for me that stuck out to me. Was there anybody else?
And I was trying to think. Some of them were like clients. The military lady. I think they all just had their little special thing. But I tell you what I did miss too. I missed the fact that she never explored just briefly, what her relationship was to her Caucasian husband.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, he showed up real quick and real quick was gone.
And left. But they were married for a number of years. What was that like for her?
Yeah.
And how did that help her see her patients in a more neutral zone or not? Or did it make her look,
Yeah. Well, and was she able to share her frustration with her husband?
With him.
And I don't know if you've had this in relationships that you've had. My partners, as men, it's hard for them to relate to some of the struggles I have, because things that happen for me or not for me are often based on, would they treat me this way if I were a man?
Exactly.
And, I very much understand my privilege and that I am socially acceptable to look at. And that has opened a lot of doors for me. And to try to tell a man that they can't. So how was he able to relate to her? And did she feel she could really share that part of herself?
Yeah, I didn't really get any of that. So that relationship, a little bit more of that would have been interesting to me.
I would have liked to know more about her married boyfriend too.
Yeah, he kind of popped in and popped out.
That was another one that I was kind of like,
where did he come from? And he wasn't brought in all along. All of a sudden he was there. I said, well, where did he come from? And so that was one of the things, and I criticized myself for maybe my reading ability, but I kept getting lost in some parts because she would go off and come back, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I coming back to? And then I have to try to. So that was just,
Yeah, I didn't see where exactly. She did a really good job of trying to kind of match her theme for sharing a specific patient with us, but that part I did kind of lose a little bit too. I was like, wait, she just confessed she's dating a married man.
I know. It's like, we don't even know where he came from. Where did she meet him? What was he, and so,
yeah, and he was a police officer too, which brought another level of like,
I was like, well, who is he? Where did he come? So those kind of little things left you hanging a little bit.
Yeah.
And I know the theme that she wanted to get across was her growth through her clients.
Yeah.
And I got that. But with any growth, there are stages. And so some of these stages for me were just skipped over and missed. I was like, how did we do this? How did you feel about this? What, you know? And so she also confessed that this married guy was like, to me, I felt was the love of her life. She really cared, but it just ended. I was like, okay,
She let him go, which
yeah,
I thought was very appropriate, considering his situation, but a huge sacrifice considering how little emotional support she had growing up. You never
yes.
hear about her mother,
Another point, yes.
right? So she's
Well, she
out
did
there
mention,
emotionally,
she mentioned her mother a little bit, that her mother had remarried.
right, right.
That's about as much as I can remember.
And her brother, we don't hear any more about her brother.
Yeah, I know. It's like,
So
okay.
she was out there emotionally just kind of on her own, which I also related to, right? And then she found this person, her person, and that she kind of was going to leave it up to the universe, I guess, that they would find themselves back together. She also, so the title of the book is The Beauty in Breaking, and she brings up the example of the Japanese art of kintsukurei.
I loved it.
Yeah, were you familiar with that previously? I did
I
print out a photo for folks who
It's
have never
beautiful.
aren't familiar with it,
Yeah.
because it is. If you don't know much about it, please Google it because it is phenomenal art. Um, with the premise being that in Japanese culture, just because something is broken doesn't mean that it's no longer useful, of
I
value,
love that.
or beautiful, right? So, and so where in your life,
So
where are more goals?
don't tell don't tell Dr. Harper that I stole that, but I've used it in therapy since I read the book.
Good. Oh, good,
It
good.
is, and I try to show them and tell them, think about this. They have a great idea. Maybe you have been raped. Maybe you have been assaulted. Maybe you have been looked over and that broke you, or unfortunately, a lot of my clients is their relatives or fathers or whoever, and they're still in this blame game. And so I try to let them know that even if you were broken emotionally with this act, that you can become this beautiful person as you grow and you get better. We're filling this in with so much platinum and gold and silver that you're gaining now, and you're putting your life together. And so when I show them those pictures like you show, said, now you're a beautiful piece of art. You're not broken, and so I've used that since I read the book, and it's worked. A lot of them could relate.
I think Dr. Harper would be thrilled that you were using that.
It was good. It's good.
And I know I had asked you when we were talking before we came online, overall, is this a book that you think you would recommend to people? Is it
Yes, I would. I have recommended it to a couple of people. There's one of my clients who is also kind of a pioneer in her field. Not that there aren't Black women lawyers, but she's kind of pioneer in this particular field. And so I recommended the book to her as a client. I said, read this. I think you can relate to some of the things that this doctor has gone through. And so I would recommend it to a lot of women, but I think more professional or semi-professional women than just a layperson, because I don't think that they might not be able to relate to some of the things that she's talking about.
Yeah, I agree. The whole piece, like we talked about before with, the administration and just trying to all those little micro inequities that that happens to her.
Yes,
I was right there. I was
yes,
like being talked
yes,
over, being looked by, as a, just as a woman having those things happen in a male dominated environment. Absolutely.
Yes.
I would recommend this to anyone that does that works with the public, honestly.
Yes. Yes.
Social workers, any frontline staff. I think just in how you never know who you're going to encounter when you go to work every day, and what their stories, and what they're bringing with them. We only touched on a few of the patients that are talked about. So if you haven't read the book already, those of you watching, please, there are so many other patient stories that she tells that we did not touch on. So,
Yes.
so I would encourage
We
you.
would be here for a while if we tried to
If
do
we
them
went
all.
patient by patient, we'd have to do like a weekly installment series.
Yes, yes. There are some very interesting things, but the thing that I took from her book for me personally is that I tried to in the past, but as reading her book, it made me even more aware that there's something I can learn from every single patient or client, which I call them, that I have. That is something that we have to keep in the forefront.
Absolutely.
When we think we know it or we know it all, it's time to retire.
Yes.
Because
I even see that with the patrons that come into the library, less here because I'm more administrative here than I was in DC. But my regular patrons in DC had unbelievable backstories of which I could never imagine. Everyone from my transient teens who were couch hopping and trying to go to school and have a normal life to
yeah,
refugees who had just arrived and didn't have anywhere else to go but the library, to my regular nannies who brought the kids in every day. I mean, everyone had a different story and reason for needing the library. And
absolutely.
we never can forget that. So I think that's another great part of the story too.
And by you having this, I want to say that it has really brought me full circle into understanding that I did not understand the importance of a library. When I was a kid, I did. It was a place to go and just have this imagination and just fly away in books. But now it really is an important part of our society. And people use it for so many different reasons, not just to read a book. And I think you having this is an example of that. So I thank you. I think this is great.
Thank you so much. And trust me, I will be calling on you to help reach some of those populations who also aren't utilizing the library for a million different reasons, to know that they are welcome at the library. So we're not done.
Okay, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
But we are done today. So I want to thank Gwen from the Carteret County Rape Crisis Center for joining me to talk about this wonderful story. And to everyone watching the video, thank you. If you didn't read the book, please check it out. If you did, feel free to drop a comment in the post. And I just want to thank you, Gwen, for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And we look forward to the next book.
Absolutely.
Okay.